Thank you. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Wonderful. How are you doing today?
Doing great. I'm Robert Diaz with Social Endurance, and I just want to welcome everybody to this video. And really excited about having Paul here on this call. Paul's the Strategic Director of Endurance Events over at the American Cancer Society. So, Paul, thanks. Appreciate you taking the time and joining us here.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, Paul, can you share a little bit, about your background, your role here at the American Cancer Society? A little bit about the events that you help oversee and the type of events.
Sure thing. So I've been with the American Cancer Society for just over 13 years now. Always working in the endurance space, but working in the field as one of our foot soldiers out there and pounding the pavement and fundraising grassroots style through some of our signature events like Relay for Life, Making Strides Against Breast Cancer, some galas. But I really found my niche in the cycling and running world pretty early on in my career. Since then, I've gone on to produce quite a few of those events and also partner with different organizations that supply those types of events to our participants. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we saw a vision to create a new channel within our global headquarters team for the endurance side of the house. That endurance kind of inventory is filled with about 90 different events that we host annually. Half of them are owned and operated, and those run the gamut from running and cycling all the way to climbing, swimming, hiking, yoga, tennis, all different types of endurance sports. In addition, we also partner with some of the top tier world marathon majors, such as the Chicago Marathon, New York Marathon, London, Berlin Marathon, and then all the way down to some of our local events in the Chicagoland area or somewhere near you that we partner with as well. And altogether, that portfolio helps us raise between $10 and $13 million annually for the American Cancer Society.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. So that's a busy calendar, about 90 events a year.
Yeah, January 10th through December 6th. So it's an always-on strategy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like you mentioned, it's not like they're all the same, right? I mean, you have a diverse portfolios, which makes it even more complex.
Absolutely. We've got events that have some extreme longevity. Even we have one of our mass market events, the Philadelphia Bikeathon, has about 3,500 participants annually and is going into its 50th year next year. So it's wow. Quite undertaking, all the way down to some of our smaller events that have a handful to 50 people. So yeah, it runs the gamut there too.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I'm really excited about this particular video that we're doing with you is that being able to take that experience that you have in that portfolio that you have, the expertise that you've gained, through all of this, and being able to share it with, other nonprofits, event companies, and also some of our corporate partners. But to be able to take that, this information and share it with them is excellent, right? So really grateful for you, agreeing to, share some of this. So, let's just get right into this. The current pandemic, has significantly impacted, especially endurance events, but in-person events, right? And along with that, fundraising, for nonprofits. What were some of your biggest initial challenges at the start of the pandemic, and how did you keep your current participants engaged?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's the key word is engagement. Right out the gates, we knew that we needed to make sure that we kept the train going there with the folks that were already fundraising for events that either had just occurred, about to occur, or were even on the horizon or later in the year. So the engagement aspect was first and foremost just trying to make sure that we communicate with our participants. A lot of the smaller events or some of the marathons do have that one-to-one relationship, so that we give some of that stewardship directly to the participants. So really talking through with them, and of course, letting everyone know that we're in the same boat as the rest of the country and the world, that we don't know what's in the future, and being very, very honest with them. We knew at the gate that if we were trying to either elongate it or brush it under the rug, that automatically kind of shut down and kind of say, okay, I'll be back next year. So the engagement play was definitely something that we needed to figure out. But in the same token, it took us about maybe 4 to 6 weeks to realize that we need to be looking long term as to how we're going to not only keep our participants engaged, but garner new participants, garner new donors, fundraisers, sponsors, in the long run, in probably a different way of doing business. But of course, not forgetting that base that's helped us raise that $10 to $13 million annually. We did this mostly through the same way that everybody else is doing it, with online forums, and we created a virtual cycling week and a virtual running week in June, where we had themes each week, some scavenger hunts, and just different activations around motivation of why they're running or riding, fundraising tips, just different ways that people, and highlighting ways that people are fundraising currently in the pandemic, and spotlighting those successes. So that was a really good opportunity because it helped us, one, bring together our total audiences of everyone to say like, hey, we're all in this together. And two, it took the pressure off some of our field staff that were looking to create those engagement plays themselves, instead putting the kind of the effort on team.
Right. So you're mentioning, and I guess kind of a pivot, right? You said about 4 to 6 weeks, after this really, things started to really close down. You really started to make a long-term, pivot, right? And then some of the challenges that you were encountering during that time. Can you just touch a little bit more on, some of the initial challenges that you really, had as you made that first pivot?
Yeah, so a lot of it was trying to decide how we are going to do what we need to do and what technology needed to happen for that to occur. But that was one of the pitfalls that we had, and I would definitely say for all of the nonprofit world, and specifically even within our own organization. We're a large organization. We have a lot of field staff that are coming up with ideas and trying to figure out how to accomplish them. So one of the challenges that we definitely had was looking at platforms first and trying to figure out what technology we were going to use, instead of really looking at what's the strategy that we're doing here, to truly be able to formulate how are we going to get participants to sign up for new events that we're going to do in a virtual atmosphere. How are we going to get them to fundraise? What's the long-term strategy? Are we looking at our audience of past participants? Are we looking at a new audience? Are we looking at lapsed participants from way back when that haven't even signed up? So that's the key that needed to be there, the cart before the horse of strategy, instead of just chasing down step tracking platforms and things. So.
Yeah. No, that's great. And before I get into kind of more of the technical part, because I do want to touch on that in a minute, regarding the platforms, is in regards to virtual events, what do you see that is doing well?
In general, or what we're doing?
Yeah, in general, without getting too technical.
So the virtual events that I see that are really hitting the mark are definitely those that have a longer term, and we would call them more challenges as opposed to a replacement event. So a virtual challenge, instead of just, I typically put on a 5K, now it is virtual and it's on Saturday, October 10th or whatever, so right. Instead of that, the virtual challenges, because it gives a longer play for engagement, and then of course a longer time period for people to fundraise before the actual challenge happens, during, after, and that's definitely where I'm seeing the biggest opportunity and the most engagement happening there. It's also a double-edged sword though, because as you have a longer event, you have to think about that engagement strategy for the participants of that event. You don't just turn it on and come back 30 days later and say, oh, it's over. So you have to come up with different things. And we've got some ideas that we did here at ACS that I can explain about too for that. So.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. So You touched on it a little bit regarding, the platforms, and it seems like everybody's rushing to those virtual platforms, right? To creating these virtual campaigns, these virtual events, and a lot of people have had to do this very, very quickly, right? And sometimes, as you rush into these things, you later have to look back and say, well, maybe this didn't fit exactly, our needs, but during that rush, it helped, accomplish some of those initial goals. So as people, rush to these, virtual events, I think it's important to take a look at the attributes of the features on a virtual event platform. So what features do you see or have you found useful for your organization and for fundraisers?
Sure. So feature-wise with the platforms, they're all evolving. So there's tons of different opportunity. I'd like to start out the gate that saying that there's not one magic bullet that's going to accomplish everything that you need for specifically for an organization-wide system of needs, and that's something that we knew in the back of our heads at the American Cancer Society, but it took a while for us to finally say, okay, there's not going to be one thing that we're chasing down that's going to solve everything that we want. But as far as what the best options and things that you need for a campaign to run successfully, I don't necessarily think it's about the piece of technology that's going to solve everything. I will say Facebook fundraising integration, one of those things that will solve a lot for you, but it's more so what's the level of customer service and support that you're going to get from the actual organization behind that technology. Are they on a trajectory of where they're going to be growing the platform in that virtual space so that you can see what's in their pipeline and vision of maybe it's not there right now, but could be in the future? And also, will they take your suggestions or kind of wish list of, is there something in the future that might be helping you, and then of course the rest of their clients to get there? So that's the biggest thing that I see as far as just specific options. There's always the opportunity for making the experience as seamless as possible for the end user when that's fundraising, plugging it in. So a single sign-on is obviously a great experience for someone that's going to be able to sign up, register, fundraise, track miles, steps, hours, whatever they're doing, elevation, how many books they're reading. I've even seen different things, just counting. How is it going to prompt them? Is the person going to have to hunt to find that on their own? Those are the different things as opposed to just different pieces of technology that we really look at.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. So one of the things that you touched on there in your answer there was, there's so many different pieces of technology out there that, help out. One of the things that we've been getting questions on and hearing a lot about of it in the community is technology, something like Strava, right? Or, something similar to Strava where, it's taken certain key metrics from the user, the fundraiser, and being able to bring that into, a dashboard and to show different levels of engagement. So regarding that, has this had a positive impact on, engagement, fundraising, a technology like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's a key audience of more of that endurance athlete that's utilizing that. I think that more and more people are getting into it as they're exercising at home and setting their own goals. So that audience is getting that are utilizing that. What we've found though, with our challenges right now is that we are using multiple different platforms. Some of them have the ability where it's connecting directly into Strava, or that Strava is pushing data into Apple Health or Google Health or whatever, that's then eventually going into a challenge platform and everything there. But what we've found is that people that are engaged with the campaign because they're looking at something that's for the mission of the organization, they utilize that to track how they're accomplishing their goal, because they may set a lofty goal of running 175 miles that month or something. And so they're going to use Strava as the tool to accomplish that goal. But when it comes to actually going into the virtual challenge that I was mentioning, they can export it as a KML file, they can just input the data that punches out from Strava, or any other type of Garmin activity, and then putting it into the challenge. So we're not necessarily finding that to be a hampering in the experience that doesn't have to connect automatically. No, they're going to do it because they want to be part of the challenge. So that was something though that was a pitfall for us, because we thought in the beginning we have to have it connected. All these platforms, they need to be connected. And
that's exactly right. I think that that's that's the sentiment out there, right? You get a lot of people that are saying we got to connect it. We got to connect. We have to have it. That has to be the piece to have on our platform.
Mm-hmm. And it's really just, again, about that end user experience. And quite honestly, in the nonprofit world, if you're driving someone back to your site on a daily basis to log activities, that's a good thing, because they're going to potentially then attention to more things like fundraising, coaching, or maybe put it out there to connect their Facebook fundraiser on the platform if they haven't done that yet. So it is a good thing to drive traffic back to.
Yeah. No, that's a fantastic answer, and I think that's super helpful, because we see that right now where you do have nonprofits, people saying you have to have that piece on the platform, and is it being I guess overplayed right now, where maybe it's not as key as we think it is, but it can still be extremely helpful, right, with a certain demographic.
And long-term strategy, I think all of them will have everything plugged in eventually. So I wouldn't worry about it too much right now, but again, just focusing on the key components of engagement and fundraising.
I agree. So just to one question, just to get away from virtual events. Right now, we're seeing some events come back, some in-person events come back in different ways, different forms. We're starting to see a little bit of that. What's your opinion and approach on live events coming back? And obviously, we all know that this can change, tomorrow, right? But what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, nobody can predict the complete future there, but as an organization, we're looking forward to potentially the second half of next year, and hoping that we can host in-person events. Will they look the same as they were in the past? Of course not. Will we need to be focusing on making sure that everyone's safe? Absolutely. When I'm working with my staff right now, though, and just talking about our in-person events, we're really talking to make sure that we don't need to focus on, are we going to have enough hand sanitizer there? Like, that's not the thing right now that we need to be about. We need to be talking about what's the strategy to keep everyone safe, and looking at an event that's a cycling event that has 3,000 participants. How can we do that? Can it be one day? It's a one-day event. Can it be 2 days instead? Can it be start at your own pace? All the different things like that. So, of course, we're looking at that. We're also taking guidance from, of course, the CDC, but more importantly, some of our industry leaders. We partner with USA Cycling, and they've already got a COVID-19 entire page of different guidance, and that's going to evolve over the next 3 to 4, 5, 6 months. And of course, there are some events that have occurred already and that are on the horizon to occur even before the end of this year. And I think the whole industry of running, cycling, and just mass market events are going to be watching to see what comes out of those, to take key learnings and to understand. But as we approach kind of our strategy for the events next year, that's a little bit different, as opposed to just thinking about let's turn on an event second half of next year. So would you like to hear a little bit more about that one?
Sure. Definitely do, because that just brings up like so many questions there. But yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so a lot of it is about the comfort level of the participants too. We, of course, as an organization, if it's not safe to hold events across the country, we would say we're not going to hold events. But of course, we're looking at regional things and just different trends and how they're going. But the way that we're setting it up is instead of getting into a case where we're going to have to cancel an event and offer deferrals, like we've done that, we're not going to do that again. We're going to be forthright with the participants about what's coming up. So if the event can happen in person, it will happen. If it can happen in a different altered way, it will happen that way. And if it has to be canceled, it will be virtual. And that's what they know signing up for the events out the gate, so that we don't get into kind of that gray area of I want a refund. And, we don't have that ability like a marathon might, with holding them accountable with chargebacks and all that kind of stuff. So right. We have to make this stance on that. But instead, what we're doing is looking at it as, can it be a hybrid event? Can people sign up now to say, I am more comfortable doing this virtually? And instead of the, instead of the in-person events, can it be that we are now garnering new participants, or people that did sign up virtually that don't live, I keep bringing up the Philadelphia event, but that don't necessarily live in Philadelphia, but now can participate virtually. So really looking at that and being 100% as honest as we can be with the participants is how we're approaching it. And then more importantly, as we're looking at producing in-person events, we're protecting ourselves as much as possible. We're seeing how late and what provisions and clauses that we can put into contracts so that we do not have to pay anything out and eat costs. And by doing that, we're telling the participant that we are saving costs for the organization and more dollars are going towards the mission by every penny that we save that way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much to that subject, right? I mean, this could go on, all day, with that. But it's interesting to hear about, your approach and hybrid, possible hybrid events, taking a look at that and being able to offer that next year. But and it's also interesting, to hear, your input, your valuable input, regarding. Yeah, you also don't forget, you also have to protect yourself, right? As an organization. And that's critical. I want to shift gears a little bit here and just discuss, corporate partnerships. And because, as you know, Social Endurance does a lot of work with, corporate partnerships and nonprofits and events. But regarding your portfolio events and those events, how valuable are corporate partnerships, to your program?
Sure. So all of our owned and operated events, that we have a 5K, 10K series in Wisconsin. That's a mass market event with 15 to 20,000 participants annually across 3 to 4 different events. Those are a lot of corporate driven events, both by sponsors and teams. Our kind of perfect corporate partner in the endurance world is a corporation that will sponsor, that they will have participants, and then that they will have volunteers that come out. So not everybody, going to want to run a 10K, so do they have volunteers that can do it? So with that trifecta, that's the perfect partnership for us. And we've really built that in a lot of our owned and operated events, but also with our partnered events in the Chicago, New York market, where we have some great partners with Google and different law firms and in accounting firms and things of that nature, that we always have those teams come back. But what's unique about that is not everyone wants to run the New York City Marathon every year. Like, that's not, you could if you wanted to do that with us, but for most people, it's going to be just once and, you're done. So, that way there's kind of an ever-flowing amount of participants that are coming through that corporate partner for us, so that they can kind of cycle between different events. If somebody from New York wanted to go and run Chicago or run something international portfolio, they could do that. But more importantly, bringing other people from that organization in, getting more people tied to our mission, and understanding what we're doing. So we really see corporate partners as a huge asset for that. And then of course sponsorship and volunteers as well. Where we have a lot of opportunity now, and even more so with the virtual events, is really aligning more with our staff that are focused in the organization on just straight account relationships with corporate partners. And it's something that as we continue to mature in our stewardship, all corporations as an organization we're really working on, and there's a thirst for it, and specifically in this virtual market, the corporations are looking for something to get their employee morale up, to get them engaged, to get them moving, their everything that affects their employee morale, their health insurance costs. So it's important.
Yeah. So you hit on a lot of really key, points there. I mean, you obviously know, corporate, the benefits for corporate partners. Well, you're touching on, team morale, the team building aspect of it, serving the community, kind of thing. Really interesting regarding the perfect corporate partnerships, right? You talked about sponsorships, participating in the events, and then the volunteering. It's like, don't forget the volunteering. It's but you're exactly right. If you take a look at how corporations can engage, if you have a corporate partner that's doing all three, you're doing really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be a massive organization, or it can be a smaller firm, and both have different capacities, but most of them have enough that they can be able to do all three of those things in one way or another. And there's plenty of people that will raise their hand to volunteer that do not want to ride 100 miles on a bike. So,
yeah, that's exactly right. So I think that brings up another, important piece, and you touched on this, was being able to offer corporations a variety of different ways to engage. And you touched on this, was because not everybody's going to want to run a half marathon or a marathon, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's where the virtual world has really come to be a lot more helpful with that, because we're able to chunk it out in different ways. So you can accomplish a half marathon now. It may not be 13.1 miles on Sunday afternoon. You could do it over 4 days and kind of aggregate all that. Or you could do it over the course of 4 hours on a Sunday instead of a typical one where you have a time limit that you need to be off the course. So people are really liking that, and it's getting them out of their comfort zone, and that's something that you and I talked about a lot when we were talking about what's the audience for virtual events, and kind of where we're going to get people and everything. So we definitely touch on that in a little bit too.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want to just go ahead into that and just share on that?
Yeah, so we've got some theories and we're testing, and that's one of the big things that I would say in creating these virtual platforms and programs, is really making sure that you're testing before you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket with a huge campaign, to make sure that you're understanding the platforms, that you're understanding the audience and how they're reacting, especially if you're doing a paid digital campaign behind it. So with that, we're hearing a lot about virtual fatigue. And in our organization, we're actually even trying to start calling events alternative events or alternate events instead of virtual, especially in 2021 year, just because people don't want to hear the word virtual anymore. So that virtual fatigue that everybody's worried about would be how many times is somebody going to want to sign up to run a virtual 5K or run a virtual challenge? And we're not looking at it that way. Instead, we're really looking at what's our audience within the organization. So of course, when we first started our virtual challenges at ACS, we started in June with an event called Determination Runs the Country. We were aggregating all of our miles and running from New York City to San Francisco. We ended up doing it 3 times back and forth. We went to our past participants. That was another engagement ploy. So after that was done, we realized, of course, we're not going to just ask them to keep doing all these virtual events, because they're going to get bored with that, or at least if they do want to do that, let them opt into it instead of us badgering them to keep just doing one after another. So that's where the audience play came into, to kind of looking at, we need to figure out how we can get to new audiences. This is a long-term play for ACS, because we're also going to be able to garner new people, new lead generation, bring those people into the ACS universe for engagement with some of our core properties that we already have, bring them along that journey, or again, just bring them back to do a virtual event in the future. So looking at those new audiences, we've really uncovered the fact that though we may be feeling virtual fatigue because we are in the endurance industry, or we are runners ourselves or cyclists ourselves, we're getting bombarded with virtual events, but we're the low-hanging fruit. There's so much opportunity out there for people that have not raised their hand to do one of these events yet, that may be at home, that may not be feeling well, that they've, not been eating the best or not exercising the most that they should have been, that will eventually raise their hand if we can find them. And if you think about it, on any given Saturday or Sunday within a 100-mile radius, you could probably find 10 to 25Ks that you could run, and that's probably an understatement of how many 5Ks or half marathons or marathons that you could run on any weekend in the year. So just think about how we can replace all of those opportunities for people. And again, we're not necessarily going to have somebody that's going to participate in every single one after another, but there are so many people that we just haven't reached yet that will eventually say yes. And it's a great opportunity because not only are we bringing in new dollars for our organization and new engagement strategy, we're bringing in new constituents that could have a longer journey with us.
Yeah, and I think that's the key point is, bringing in new constituents, right? It's with what you were just saying, the virtual event engagement, being able to offer it in a way that's very convenient for people to engage, right? I think that is key right there is, right? Instead of the traditional way where travel to this location on this day at this time and so on, right? It's being able to say, well, I can give and participate, engage in support of this fantastic nonprofit at my own pace, wherever, right? So I completely agree. And one thought that came into my mind was that have you looked at any numbers or have you speculated about still the opportunity with people who have not engaged in virtual events, right? Have you talked about that or have you looked at that at all?
Not necessarily a picture of how many we haven't reached, but more so looking at the fact that we've now had 3 events under our belt. 2 of them were focused on brand new constituents. Like, of course, we were promoting to our past participants in a soft ask, but really pushing through digital acquisition and just pulling different levers that we haven't pulled before to get new. And on average, we're getting about a $45 registration from them, and then an additional $40 to $50 in fundraising, so $100 new per person. So quantifying that, and that's a pretty low spend against that when you think about what we're actually spending on digital advertising and the actual deliverable. So that $100 is the ratio of ROI is pretty good on that. So it's really $80 on to the 100. So quantifying that and seeing where we can go with that, that's more where we're setting our goals as opposed to trying to do a market study of untapped resources. So
sure. Right, now completely understand. Now this has been fantastic, and it's great to just being able to share this your experience and everything that you're doing there with that massive portfolio, and being able to share this with other nonprofits, event companies, or corporations, just to be able to give them a little bit of insight, and also inspiration that even if you're frustrated and going through some of these transitions and trying to create more value for your constituents through virtual events or just engagement in the mission, this is helpful. So with that, is there anything else that you could share with some of nonprofits out there, and typically they may be a little bit smaller than ACS, so anything else that you could share with them that would help them with the whole engagement, fundraising, virtual events, anything else like that?
Sure. I mean, just starting out the gate, I actually presented on this in the annual peer-to-peer conference in February, right before everything hit, which is that though we're a large organization, we're feeling the same things that they are, especially when entering this world of virtual events or creating an endurance program. Like, we're still starting from scratch in some ways and having to figure out the different things that are out there. But for the smaller organizations, really, I think just trying to recognize that that the strategy component is the key driver of what you need to think about first when thinking about any of these campaigns, just because that's going to be what props it up. It's one of those harder things to think about or to conceptualize or to put down on paper. I understand that. And sometimes the flashy thing of technology is out there, and plus, they are calling on you for sales to work with them. So really making sure that you drive down into that strategy and testing so that strategy, maybe we don't be afraid of it not working, but test it out to understand, is this going to work? Is this going to work for my audience that I have influence over, first and foremost? So that's my biggest takeaway from it. And then just don't be afraid to reach out to different organizations like Social Endurance or to the peer-to-peer forum, because they're there to help connect with other organizations that are in this same type of scenario as you, so that you can learn from them and just see the equivalency of what other small nonprofits are doing or what the big nonprofits are doing, and understanding we're all in this together. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. And again, Paul, thank you so much for your time. And, thanks for sharing, all of this, with us and the opportunity to share it with, the community, the nonprofit community, the event, companies and corporate partners. So, appreciate your time, and, let's connect again in the future and go from there and then do another one of these.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.